Thanks for tuning in to MR Fishing, and welcome to my new series, which is Tackle Talk in the Tackle Corner. It's where each month I'm going to break down something with kayak bass fishing in general. So it can be anything from lures to line to rods, reels, or any other gear that's kind of specific to kayak bass fishing. Since that's what most of my content is, I think it would be a fun idea, especially during the winter months where I'm not really getting out to go fish. I can do stuff like this and talk about either past experiences or things I'm looking forward to. And so for this first video, I'm going to talk about something that I've always wanted to do, but in practice it doesn't work out oftentimes because I have limited time on the water. I don't spend a lot of time trying new things. And you'll watch my videos, and if you've watched them in the past, you know I like a couple lures a lot, and you'll see me throwing them pretty often. I really like throwing spinnerbaits, lipless crankbaits, plastic worms, swim jigs, finesse swim baits, and I'll throw top water, and every now and then I'll throw bladed jigs as well. But outside of those, I don't know if I even caught a fish on a different lure than that in the past year. And I think part of that is that I have confidence in those other baits. I don't have confidence in things I've never caught a fish on. And until I catch a fish on something, it's the weirdest thing to where you just don't think you can catch a fish on it. Currently, my two favorite lures are both lures I would not have used to bass fish pretty much at all before I started kayak fishing. It's a lipless crankbait, and that's the spinnerbait. A spinnerbait was a lure I used pike fishing. Didn't use it bass fishing, hardly at all. And now it's my go-to. A lipless crankbait was a lure I never caught a fish on until 2 years ago. And now it is one of my absolute favorites, especially early on in the year. It was just money for me this past spring. And the previous one. And I've caught some huge pike on it as well over the past 2 years, 3 years really. And it's one of those things where I had no confidence in it. And the only reason I used it is because I listened to my grandpa talk about how great this lure was, like for my whole life, and watch him catch big bass after big bass on it. And I'm just finally like, all right, there's got to be something I'm doing wrong. And it was actually when I started kayak fishing, is when I really started to like that style of lure. So one thing I really want to do next year, especially early on in the season, before a lot of tournaments get going, is pick some lures that I've never caught a fish on and really learn how to use them. So I got a couple examples with me, and so this video's topic, as you can see from the title, is no confidence baits. I've talked about confidence baits in the past, but I want to talk about some lures that I've never caught a fish, never had a bite, but I would like to change that this next year. And so I'm gonna make my gear setups, what I'm gonna be throwing, as well as line, and talk about, okay, why haven't I never caught a fish on this and how can I make that different? So I'm gonna show you these lures now. Well, that's a bit of the struggle bus. There we go. Number 2. And number 3. I think I'm going to focus on 3 lures today because these are all lures I'll probably use in the spring. So I think they are ones that I'll probably put some focus on, along with obviously the lures I normally bring out in the spring, like crankbaits and bladed jigs. So these 3 lures, I've never caught a fish on them. I've never had a bite, but I watch people just catch them. This video is sort of inspired by 2 people in particular. First being Alex Rudd. I'm sure if you're watching my videos, you've probably seen his. And 2 lures that he uses and swears by. I have not had a bite on, but I'm kind of determined to, just because of all the fish he catches. And then the other one is mostly inspired by Greg Blanchard, which, once again, we probably all know who that is. But he has a lure that he uses often that I've like, okay, why can't I do that? I can catch fish on all lures, but it's never worked for me. And so I'll talk about that one first, and that's the football jig, or just a jig in general. Weird thing for me is that I really like fishing jigs, moving jigs in particular, but flipping, pitching jigs, football jigs, I've never caught a single bass that style. Closest thing I've caught to it with that would be like a Ned rig, but I've never caught anything in that style before. I've never even had a bite. And I just like, I know people swear by it. It's a year-round lure, but I could never made it work. So I'm gonna make an emphasis maybe one day just to take it out and figure it out. Second up, this is just an example, but medium diving or deep diving crankbaits. I got a medium diving right here. This is a Berkley Muddy Badger. Now this is obviously something that is newer, but the style of lure is not new. And I've never had any success with medium diving crankbaits, or basically anything with the bill. I catch a lot of fish on lipless crankbaits, and in the past I've done well with small jerk baits for bass, especially in rivers for smallmouth. But I don't use them a lot anymore, mostly because I haven't had any luck on them since I was very young. But basically anything with the bill. I've never really caught a bass with that style of bait. I don't see why I can't, and so I'm going to make it a point of emphasis. And then the last one is something that's pretty foreign to me, and that is a big old swim bait. So this is the Berkley's Cull Shad. It's similar to some other soft body swim baits out there. I got this one particularly because it's a little smaller than some of the other big swim baits out there. But I've caught fish on swim baits. Just one's not that size. But I know the bigger swim baits get the bigger bass. So one thing I'm hunting for in 2024 is a 21-inch or bigger largemouth. And it's kind of a goal to catch a Fish Ohio largemouth. And I'm going to try to do that this next year. And I feel like that kind of lure is going to up my chances. So now we're going to talk about what I'm going to throw them on. And so with the football jig, I'm going to go with medium heavy, 7.2 rod, fast action, throw fluorocarbon, probably 17 pound. That seems to be kind of a consensus way people will throw it. Next up with the Money Badge, or the other medium diving crankbaits, going to be throwing that with a medium action, fast action rod, 7 foot. And then I'll probably be using copolymer. I like using that for crankbaits because it doesn't have as much bird nest ability as fluorocarbon does, and the smaller lure that's not as heavy as like a big jig or a spinnerbait. I'm a little wary on using fluorocarbon, and plus with the baits moving so fast, it doesn't really matter. So something with not very much memory is pretty good, or it doesn't bird's nest as bad. And then lastly, the Cull Shad, or any of the big swim baits. I bought a couple other ones. I'm going to be throwing that with a heavy action rod, 17-pound line, fluorocarbon. Yeah, the bigger lures, I'm not really worried about using fluorocarbon because they cast themselves and they don't really get tangled. Now for reels, I'm probably going to be using the same reel for the Cull Shad and the football jig, one of my Apex Grands, 7-gear ratio. And then for the football jig, not the football jig, for the Money Badger, I'll use a 6-gear ratio. Apex Elite, that's what I use for all my crankbaits, and then other slower lures. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm hoping to catch a fish on one of these, and I think what I'm going to do for one of my first giveaways for 2024 is that first fish that I catch on one of these lures, I'll do a giveaway of whatever that lure is. And that'll just be when I post the video. You just got to comment. So long way off, but that'll be a fun way for me to incentivize myself, because I like doing giveaways. I like sharing, kind of like people like to say the juice about things that are working for them. So I wouldn't mind sharing in that to other people. It's something that is one of my favorite parts of fishing, which is getting other people into the sport. So thanks for tuning in to the Tackle Corner. I'm going to be doing these more often. I'm going to try to keep most of them under 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop it right now.